Hey guys, it's Sarah with AmericanTrucks.com, and today we have a review and install of the Rough Country 2.5-inch leveling kit with N3 shocks, fitting your 04 to 08 two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive F-150 models. This kit is best suited for the F-150 owner who wants a leveling solution but still plans to tow often, so doesn't want to remove all of their factory rake. This kit features more room for wheels and tires up front courtesy of the strut spacers, and also has some rear lift as well thanks to the rear lift blocks, and as a bonus comes with updated shocks as well. This kit provides 2.5 inches of lift in the front and 1 inch of lift in the rear, so you get lift in both locations but don't lose that factory rake. Keep in mind these front strut spacers measure in at about 2 inches. You get that extra ½ inch of lift from the change in suspension geometry by installing these spacers. The rear lift blocks are a little bit more straightforward. They measure 1 inch for your 1 inch of lift. On our truck today, we have 31-inch tires stock. Depending on the model or year of your truck, you may have a different stock size, so keep that in mind. The manufacturer notes with this kit you can fit up to a 33-inch tire comfortably. Now, tread pattern does matter for this. If you're choosing a more aggressive tread pattern like the mud terrain you see here, you may experience some mild rubbing on your factory plastics. However, if you are choosing a more mild tire like an all-terrain, you should clear just fine. So the recommended size is a 33, as I said before. Because we have 35s, we threw them on so you can see how they look and fit. Although they do fit sitting on our flat shop floor, they will rub during normal driving, going over bumps, or turning. This kit includes rear N3 shocks, which are similar to factory ride quality and are a nice upgrade over your aging factory components. It also includes rear lift blocks and longer U-bolts, as well as front strut spacers and all of the necessary hardware. So as far as price goes, this kit comes in at around $150, which is on the lower end price-wise when compared to other options. And for your money, you get both front and rear lift, as well as shock replacements, so you can upgrade your components while you're installing this leveling kit. And as far as the install goes, I'm giving this one a 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. It does feature a direct bolt-up installation with no modification required and can be done within 3 hours. So with that said, let's check out our install. For this install, you will need an impact gun, or a ratchet and hand tools will work just fine. 30, 24, 22, 21, 18, 13, and 15 millimeter sockets. You may also want a swivel extension. You'll need a vacuum tool, and a caliper hanger or a bungee cord will work just fine, a hammer or a rubber mallet, a flathead screwdriver or a pop clip removal tool, 14, 15, 18, and 27 millimeter wrenches, and you will need a pry bar. Alright, so the first step in our install, we're going to unplug our ABS sensor. We're also going to disconnect the vacuum line from the back of the knuckle. Remove the sensor from behind your wheel well liner. The plug should be right here. What you're going to do is press down on the connector and remove it. Grab a pop clip removal tool and remove the pop clip that holds this line. Disconnect the vacuum line from your brake line, and then pull it off of the spot on the back of your knuckle. Next up, we're going to remove the nut on the outer tie rod, grab a 21 millimeter socket, and get it off. Next up, we're going to remove the nut that's holding on the knuckle to the upper control arm. Grab a 21 millimeter socket, and you will want to swivel here. Go ahead and get it removed. We are going to thread this back on though until we release this ball joint. Alright, so it's not likely that this ball joint will release on its own. If that is the case, you're going to want to grab a hammer and hit the top of the knuckle here to shock it loose. Alright, so we do have to disconnect the sway bar, and I think the easiest way to do this is to remove the nut on the underside of the end link. Now you only have to remove one side of the end link to be able to remove this. You should take off both sides of your sway bar just to make your job a little easier. Go ahead and grab your 18 millimeter socket and remove it. Next up, we're going to remove the two 18 millimeter bolts holding on our brake caliper. This will relieve the brake line and also make it so we can remove the knuckle. Go ahead and grab an 18 millimeter socket and remove both of these bolts. Now you can pull your caliper off of your truck. And hang it off to the side. If you don't have a caliper hanger tool, you can use a bungee cord or anything that secures the caliper and doesn't have any tension for the brake line. Next up, we're gonna remove the nut that holds on the knuckle to the lower control arm. We're gonna grab a 24mm socket and remove this nut. We are gonna thread it back on because we still have to release this ball joint. We're gonna repeat the process we used up top, and we're gonna hit this part of the knuckle to release the ball joint. Next up, we're gonna remove the rotor itself. Now, we recently had the brakes apart on this truck, so the rotor should come straight off. If yours does not, you can tap around it and on the backside, but with a rubber mallet. Next up, we're gonna remove the dust cover that blocks the axle nut so that we can remove the nut itself. So you're gonna wanna hit this with a little PB blaster, depending on how rusty it is, and then get behind it and pry it off with a flathead. Next up, we're gonna remove the axle nut with a 13mm socket. Now, if the ball joint in your outer tie rod does not release from the knuckle, go ahead and grab your hammer and release it the same way you release the other two ball joints. Next up, we need to pull vacuum to be able to release the four-wheel drive so we don't damage it. Grab a line and slide it over the larger port that your vacuum line used to be attached to. Now we're gonna use our vacuum tool to pull 24 pounds of vacuum. This releases the four-wheel drive actuator because it's engaged unless it sees the 24 pounds and allows us to slide the axle out of the back of your knuckle without damaging your four-wheel drive. We're setting our vacuum tool to the side so we can start to disconnect the knuckle. Set your vacuum tool down, make sure it's still pulling pressure and you don't bump it to release the pressure. We're gonna now start to disconnect the knuckle. Go ahead and pull down on your upper control arm and remove this nut. Slowly release your upper control arm. If it doesn't come all the way out, carefully pry it the rest of the way. And actually, our axle has already released out of the back of the knuckle, which is good. Now we can carefully remove the nut on the bottom of your knuckle and remove the knuckle off the truck. Now we do have to maneuver around our axle a bit here. I'm lifting it up so you guys can see the bolt that we're going for. There's a 30mm nut on this side and a 27mm bolt on the other side. This holds on the bottom of our strut. I'm gonna set the axle down here for a second. Grab my 27mm wrench for the other side. And my 30mm socket for this side, and remove the nut. Now, depending on how much tension, this should wiggle its way out. Next up, we're gonna remove the three 15mm nuts on the top of our strut. What you're gonna do is grab a 15mm ratcheting wrench, just because we don't have a ton of space up there. You can use a small socket if you'd like, and remove these. We're gonna leave one or two at the front just loosely installed to keep the strut from falling all the way out. With all of the nuts loose or removed, you can lift up a little bit on your strut to get the last one off. and remove it off the truck. All right, so before we can install the spacer on our truck, we do have to install these bolts in the underside so they can act like studs. What we're gonna do is line them up to the hex-shaped holes and press them into place. If they don't wanna seat all the way in, we will lightly tap them into place. With the spacer placed on top of the vise, or you can put it in the vise if you don't think it's going to move, grab your hammer and we're gonna lightly tap these into place. We're just rotating the spacer as we go, trying to keep it as flat as I can on the top surface while allowing the studs to poke through. Slide your spacer over the top of the studs. It only goes on in one configuration, so make sure all three of the studs are lined up. Grab your nuts and thread them onto the top of the strut. We're using the factory nuts over the factory studs here. Then what we're gonna do is grab a 15mm socket and tighten them down. Now you can grab your strut and slide it underneath your control arm and into place. Now it's gonna be 180 degrees out of where it was because of the spacer. So line up the studs through the top of your strut tower. Once you have them in place, grab one of the nuts that were included with the kit and thread them over the top of the stud to keep it in place. With the top in place, you can now press down on your control arm to line up the bottom of your strut in the opening here. With the bottom of your strut lined up, you can thread the rest of your nuts over the top of the studs up top. There are two in the front and then there's one at the back, similar to how the factory ones came out. So you may have a little bit of a hard time seeing the back one, but no, it's the same thing, just one in the far back. And what we're gonna do here is grab a 14mm ratcheting wrench. It's a little bit smaller than factory. We're gonna tighten each of these down. Using a pry bar, press the bottom of your strut in place. And what we're gonna do is line up the bolt. Now you may need to press and also come up or down with the control arm to wiggle it in place. So prying back on your strut and going up and down with your lower control arm should be able to get this bolt in and through. If it goes almost all the way but not all the way, you can grab a rubber mallet and tap it the rest of the way. Grab the nut and thread it on the other side. Grab your 27mm wrench and 30mm socket and tighten it down. Now you can line up the knuckle, make sure that the axle is sliding in place, and it goes over the bottom ball joint. Grab your nut and get a few threads on there just to be safe. We're now going to tighten down the nut, holding the knuckle to the lower control arm. Grab your 24mm socket and tighten it down. With vacuum still pulled on the back of your knuckle, press your axle through the knuckle till you can see threads on your axle. Grab the axle nut and thread it over the end. Grab your 13mm socket and tighten it down. All right, so we're supporting the bottom of the knuckle to get it a little bit higher, and we're gonna take a pry bar, we're gonna pry down to line up our upper control arm through the top of the knuckle. Grab your nut and thread on a few threads on the bottom here. All right, so we have a pry bar pressing down on the top of the ball joint to prevent it from spinning. We have a 21mm socket and a swivel extension to get on here. We're gonna tighten it down. Now you can reinstall your outer tie rod through the side of your knuckle. Grab your 21mm socket and tighten it down. Now we're going to use a pry bar on the bottom of this as well, just to put pressure on the bottom of your outer tie rod. Hold the ball joint still. Grab your 21mm socket and tighten it down. Now you can thread on the nut on the bottom of your sway bar end link. Grab an 18mm socket and tighten it down. Replace your rotor. And I'm just gonna throw a lug nut on there just to hold it in place while I finish tightening everything down. Grab your caliper off the hanger. Line it up over the top of the rotor. And line up the two bolt holes on the back of the knuckle. Grab your factory hardware and reinstall it. Just moving the entire knuckle to give myself a little more room. Then I'm going to grab the 18mm socket and tighten these down. Make sure you're plugging the vacuum line back to the back of your knuckle. Replace the pop clip that holds on your ABS line and plug it back in. And finally, replace the dust cap that goes over top of your axle nut. If you need, you can tap it into place with a rubber mallet. All right, so once you're done with the front, repeat that step on the other side. And once both sides of the front are complete, we're gonna move on to the rear. The first thing we're gonna do is to remove the bolt that holds on the lower part of our shock. With an 18mm wrench and a 15mm socket, remove the bolt. Repeat that with the upper bolt with an 18mm wrench and a 15mm socket. and remove your shock. Next up, we're going to remove the 4 21mm nuts that hold your U-bolts to your axle. All right, now that we have our factory components uninstalled from our truck, we can check them out side by side with our new components here. As you can see, Rough Country has included one of their premium shocks that's going to deliver that factory feel and ride quality while being a nice upgrade over your worn out stock shock. In addition, they've also included new hardware, new longer U-bolts to replace the worn out factory ones, which a lot of times won't come off the truck in one piece. So with that said, let's finish up our install. At this point, we're going to drop our axle down so we can slide the spacer in between the current spacer and your spring. Once you've dropped it down far enough, with the openings up top, slide it on top of your factory spacer and line up the holes. Now you can begin to raise your axle. Now if this doesn't line up perfectly, you can do each side simultaneously because it is a straight axle vehicle. That might help with aligning this spacer. As you raise your axle, make sure that it's still in line and it slides into place. Now you can install the U-bolts into the factory brackets. Install the included hardware, the washer and the lock nut. Repeat that with the other U-bolt. Make sure the U-bolts are seated in top of the bracket on top of your leaves. All right, now you can tighten down these nuts with a 22mm socket. Make sure you do so evenly across the U-bolt and also across the axle. At this point, we can install our shock. We are installing it with the body down. Rough Country confirmed this is the proper way to install, although the directions say otherwise. So go ahead and get the top portion installed with the factory hardware. Grab your 15mm socket and 18mm wrench and tighten this down. Compress your shock and line it up with the mount and install the factory hardware. If you need to, you can tap it into place. Grab your 15mm socket and 18mm wrench and tighten it down. So after everything is bolted up, make sure it's torqued to spec, and you may want to get a professional alignment afterwards. But that is going to do it for the review and install of this kit. And remember, for all things F-150, keep it at AmericanTrucks.com.